On this show, you'll find inspiration, motivation, and advice from experts, as well as valuable tips on how to get started or improve your business. Let's dive into how you can begin and grow your wisdom business. Inspiring others looks different for everyone. How will you inspire? Welcome to the WiseDome podcast, and today we're chatting with Bron Williams. Bron is the bias specialist. She's a speaker, consultant, and author. Over the past 16 years, she has shattered family and cultural expectations around what a woman should do, changing societal norms, and has discovered in her own journey that it takes courage to let go of the long-held beliefs that hold us back. Bron is helping people use bias as a data point, focusing on progress, not precedent, to gain equilibrium in life and business. Bron, welcome to the WiseDome podcast.
Thank you, Nikki. It's lovely to be here.
I am looking forward to having this chat because it is one thing, isn't it, out there, the stereotypes, that are out there and so forth. And I would love to know how you actually got started in this business.
Oh, that's a great question, because I think, like most of us, we don't set out to do something. That so often things fall our way, and it's what we do with those serendipitous situations. So I'll just give you a very quick rundown. I at 8 years old, I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and so I went that path, did the training, was a teacher for 25 or 30 years in a variety of different situations and roles. And then midlife, as like so often happens, the world turns upside down, and I left my marriage, and so I had to reinvent myself as we often do midlife, whether we go through a big thing like a divorce or not. Midlife seems to be the moment of reinvention. And I joined the Salvation Army and became an ordained minister. So talk about not just a pivot, we're doing a complete 90-degree angle turn. But I loved that. I got a degree, actually got an honours degree. And as part of my involvement with the Salvation Army, I went to Nauru when the Australian government opened up the offshore processing centre there again. And I worked with the asylum seekers. And it was while I was there that I started to be confronted with my own biases. I didn't actually know that word. The only time I'd knew bias was either from lawn bowls, because the balls have a bias, or from making clothes where your colour is on the bias. That was the only way I understood bias. But I started to see things in myself. I'd grown up in the southern suburbs of Sydney, down in the Sutherland Shire, so very white, very conservative, Bible Belt area of Sydney. Everybody looked like me, sounded like me. We pretty much thought the same, and hadn't come across people who were different. And here I was on a little tiny island in the middle of the Pacific with Pacific Islanders and a lot of people from Iraq and Iran and Sri Lanka and Africa. So, all speaking languages that were different to mine, lots of different religions. And I was very confronted. And I realised that the person who would have said she didn't have a racist bone in her body actually had a latent racism, because somewhere along the line I'd learned that difference was a threat. And that was purely what it was. And so I had to be aware of that. And as I mixed with the Pacific Islanders, with the Nauruans, I started observing, not only in myself but in the other Australian expats on the island, we had this sense of superiority. Hello, first world country, university educated, certainly, surely we would know better than people who lived on this little tiny island. And I sat down one day with Fatima, who was heading up the Nauruan team for the Salvation Army, told her what I'd been observing, and she said, "Oh, we know that about you guys, but we just accept it." I was just floored. And again, I hadn't heard anything about white privilege or white superiority. So that set me off onto like two quite different tangents in a sense. I was learning things about myself. And so that's where it started. And a couple of years later, I actually left the Salvos because I really wanted to pursue. Salvos have great agendas, great focus, but I wanted to pursue what was mine. And so that's where it started, with understanding these things about myself. Because and now that's what I work with. I've been working sort of with doing consultancy, particularly during COVID, because a lot of biases bubble up during COVID. Let me tell you. And now I've sort of taken all of that I've done, my teaching, my pastoral work as a minister, the consulting work, and just taking all that with underpinning with bias, and now actually looking, and as you can see from my, which your listeners won't, creating courageous conversations to navigate changes in culture, particularly for women in leadership, because we face bias all the time. We have our own biases that work against us as well. So, it's about helping women be know their power. And not have that imposter syndrome.
We're powerful. That imposter syndrome that sneaks in. And I think that's one of those big things, isn't it? That's a bias that's affecting that for so many of us.
It is. It is, because it's always about the narratives that either we're told or that we tell ourselves.
And so amazing, start to this journey, and realization too, isn't it? It's just that moment of realization, and it just sort of the evolution from that moment, what you've been through and gone through to get to this particular point. Where was the tipping point where you said, you know what, I'm actually going to start being a speaker. I'm actually going to start putting myself out there and sharing my knowledge with the world?
I had, since I was 40, so I'm now in my mid-60s, I had wanted to be a speaker for a long time. As a teacher and also as a pastor, you are speaking all the time, and as a pastor in a church, I'm basically giving a keynote speech every Sunday.
Anyway.
And the topic is the Bible. But so this was something that I've always loved to do. And from about the time I was 40, this is what I wanted to do. But of course, life intervenes with your goals and plans, but it was always there in the back of my mind. And I think there's something pivotal. We talk about 50 as being a pivotal year, but 60 is really pivotal, because that, really 2/3 of your life has passed. If you're lucky, you've got another 30 years. And that's what I see myself as being in that last third of my life. And I wanted to make sure that I used these next 30 years, knowing how fast the last 60 have gone, for something that was in my heart that I really wanted to do. And so, and also some of it was purely financial. At 60, I was actually able to draw down my superannuation. So I had some money to, I had that to then go out on my own and with sufficient money to get going.
And where did you get going? Where did you start positioning yourself?
That's good. Actually, from a platform perspective, I use LinkedIn a lot. That's where I have the largest my largest visibility. And I'm going to do a little shameless plug here. I've been included in a directory of the top 2,000 women who are inspiring by the work that they do on LinkedIn. I only found that out this week.
Congratulations.
So I was just thrilled. So I'm thinking, the last 6 years of putting my content out there, and whether that's, a small post, an article, or what I've been doing recently is putting blogs up on my website and then directing people there. I've been running events. I've got an event coming up next week. So, it's just about putting yourself out there and choosing a platform that works for you. And because for me, working with people in business, I felt I had the most opportunity I was going to find people in leadership and now particularly women in leadership, but also working in companies where they wanted to address bias.
Right.
And it's become much more like the whole space of looking at how we bring equilibrium into the world is much larger now than it was, say, even 6 years ago. People understand that we need to do this. We can't we're not all just one cookie cutter shape.
God, no. But, recognizing, recognizing that's the platform for you, LinkedIn, with, that's the market that you're, trying to capture. That's, a great, initial, like to realize that as well. So with regards to setting up and saying, okay, I am going to go down this path, like, what made you decide, obviously, yes, your experience in, speaking and so forth, that was very likely the path that you were just going to direct yourself through to. Is there any other sort of area that you are sort of looking to expand on with your business and your offering, like create courses or, a subscription membership model of sort or anything like that with what you do?
Yeah. I already have a couple of courses up and running, and one is identifying personal bias. So that's a 10-part course, which is not about, technically looking at biases like affinity bias or the Horns effect or the halo effect, but looking at areas of our lives in which bias can operate. Things like money, our identity,
yes,
our family and background, our relationships, because biases in the end are just ways in which we categorise experiences and ideas and people. Yeah. But often bias is only seen as negative, and so obviously we see the negative outworking in things like sexism and racism and ageism and disability discrimination. But bias can also be a data point. And I always, being the eternal optimist that I am, I always want to bring hope to the world that if bias is a human condition, is part of the human condition, I say it's part of our psychological DNA. And so it doesn't matter where you were born, it doesn't matter what the colour of your skin is or your language or faith, we all have biases as human beings. But it's about taking those biases once we're identifying them and then decide what we're going to do with it. Like I said earlier that somewhere along the line I'd learnt the difference was a threat. Well, what I've done now is flip that on its head. I see difference as an asset. Yes. So, the bias that I uncovered about my own racism and white privilege, I could just wallow in that and go, oh, I'm a terrible person. But that's what I learned. And now I'm going to use that and see, okay, if I see people who are different to me, I see that as an asset. What can I learn from them? How can we work together? So that was so that is one course. I also have a training course for companies who want to be able to do unconscious bias training for themselves, and rather than, because it becomes expensive to engage a consultant over a period of time to keep coming in and running workshops. So I train the trainer program where we go through, it's a 6-part program. Yep. The first 2 parts are looking at, what bias is and how it turns up in the world. And then the last 4 are around how does bias impact on culture, communication, change and conflict. Right. Which are all 4 things that are pertinent to the workplace. So I've already got those 2 programs, all there being used, and one of my clients has most certainly been using those with their staff. Yeah. And isn't that, it's one of those things, isn't it? You just evolve your business over time because you start recognising what your clients are needing in other ways. Yes. And, like I mentioned to you earlier before we started recording, it's, this whole journey of sharing your knowledge online or, even as a speaker in front of other people, you do go through this process of, there's so many different ways we learn, but there's also so many different ways we deliver our content. Yes. And it's, to those, we're constantly, reviewing and recognising what our audience is needing from us. So it's great that you, obviously took on that. Absolutely. Yeah. And I've also, I did coaching for quite a long period of time and then left that. And now I'm moving back also into that mentoring space because particularly, it's really working only with women because I know that, as a woman, I understand women, but it's about taking women where they want to go.
Yeah.
But often women come to me when they're frustrated. They don't want another set of skills. They don't want another program. They don't want another, I
don't need more on my shoulders.
No, but they're not sure what it is that they need. Yeah. And so that's my role, because I understand about what's happening underneath the surface.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that.
I help them, dig into what is it that's sitting there.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing you say that, because, it's funny how conversations just somehow I had a conversation about this yesterday with someone. It's just, the definition of a mentor, or, why we actually are asking for help. Sometimes we don't even know what we're asking for.
No.
Because we're just so frustrated. We've got our blinkers on and we think we don't know what we need, but we know we need something. So it's, have that conversation with someone such as yourself helps us open up and go, okay. But back online with regards to how you share your knowledge online and your experiences and so forth, were there any challenges that you came across that, would like to share with our audience that, they may need to look out for? Or
yeah, look, I think there are, given that at age 60, I actually was quite, we call it people in my generation digital migrants, because we did not grow up in the digital space. Yep. But I've migrated really, really well. I actually really love
Good on you.
Technology. And I'm always open to learning new things. And I tell you, COVID has made us learn a whole lot of stuff that we didn't.
Sink or swim to a degree, isn't it?
It was, and interestingly, even prior to COVID, I had already been using Zoom. I'd been doing some conversational English classes with students in China, so that was an interesting, just little side thing that I was doing as well. Once a teacher, always a teacher.
Teacher,
you can't leave it alone. But I think the challenges were learning. And they're not insurmountable challenges, but they are learning new technological things. Like the platform that I have my programs up on, I actually had to play around on that. You've got to be prepared to take time to learn a new platform. If it's LinkedIn, even if it's LinkedIn, how does LinkedIn work? What I don't know anything about the algorithms. I certainly noticed when they change, though. Because, you don't get the same cut through and you think, okay, what do I need to do now? Yeah. So you've got to be, I think so one is about actually learning to navigate the different platforms that you wanted to do. Two is really to know that you are actually going to have to keep on changing. I just mentioned about the algorithms changing on LinkedIn. And sometimes that can get really frustrating. And there are still things I have no idea. Some posts I put up get 1,000 views and then some get 45. And you go, why did that happen? But I think it's a bit like the stock market. You play it for the long game.
Yeah. And you can't become complacent, can you? You can't just sit there and think it's in there, done. You don't have to go back and revisit.
No, because like all social media, it's been and gone. Like literally, sometimes some of my posts will last a few days. People come back into them, but most of the time you've got to expect that they're only going to last a day at the most. And one of the things that I learned and have learned is you need to be consistent. If you can post 5 days a week, do it 5 days a week. But if you can only post 1 day a week, do it 1 day a week. It's not actually always about how many times you post. It's the fact that you're consistently turning up in the space. And, I think that's the same. If you're an elite athlete, you have to turn up to training every day. Or, if you're a football player, you have to turn up to training and you have to turn up to the game. You can't be doing these things. And it's exactly the same for those of us who are in business. So get familiar with your platforms and decide which one works for you. Be consistent. Turn up basically when you say that you're going to turn up, and don't believe everything you think.
Yeah.
And look, we talked about, I talked earlier about having biases against ourselves.
Yeah.
Look, I was starting this at 60. I'm the eldest in my family. My brother and sister are 2 years younger, then 2 years younger again. Both of them are in semi-retirement. And here am I setting up a new business. And I'm thinking, what am I doing? I'm too old to be doing this. At this age, I should be, actually, what's the date? Yeah, in 9 days' time, I'm old enough to apply for the aged pension.
Oh.
But, they're the norms that are around our lives. And I actually had to get over myself, over my own thinking. Yeah. And I have a great coach, and she always used to say to me, Bron, age is just a number. But I had to understand, why was it I had these biases around age for what I was able to achieve. Yeah. Because sometimes we actually have to know what the stories are and where those stories have come from. And I'm a big believer in facing our stories and owning them. Yeah. Brené Brown talks a lot about that, owning our stories, because once we own them, they lose their power over us. And then we can get on with the job that we want to do.
Yeah. Oh, so true. And, like this, you're mentioning age is just a number, and it's so true. The one thing that I hold on to so often, because I think, what am I doing starting this business, that I'm starting, running a platform and stuff. Samuel L. Jackson, I think it was, he didn't actually start acting until he was in his 40s and won his first Oscar and so forth. So it's just amazing. Age is a number. If you've got the drive to do it and the passion, and like you said, there's the stories in the background, but there's also those experiences that create those stories. And therefore, some of us just want to have a huge wealth of experience and stories, and then all of a sudden we'll change that direction. But I would love to ask you, is there any particular lesson that you learned yourself internally through this whole process about yourself?
Oh, that is a really, really good question. I think the thing I've learned is that what I long suspected is actually true, that I am capable of so much more than I have already done. Yep. I think that's, for me, has been the hugest, if that's a beautiful word, I'd make that one up, hugest learning for me is that I always thought I was made for more and that I had more, but I had doubted that I could actually be more. And I've discovered that I can and that I am. And so there's a congruence.
Yeah, I love that.
But I don't think I would have got here unless I literally had to put myself on the line, which is what you do. I've always said, whenever you're in an entrepreneurial space, you're making it up as you go along.
Yeah, exactly.
And that making up comes out of who we are. That's what I've discovered. It comes out of who we are, not necessarily the jobs that we've done or the roles we've had in the past, but who we are.
Yeah, which leads me to my next question. What legacy are you looking to leave?
I have recently started a Facebook group called A Seat at the Table because women have been, for so long, we've been fighting for a seat at the table. And I don't want us to fight for a seat at the table. I want us to build our own tables and invite others to join us. So that's my focus. Because it's all about women for me now. It's all about women trusting themselves, owning who they are, knowing that they are powerful and they're beautiful and they're strong and they're all the things that we know we are, but not because we've faced stuff. I get a bit tired of the whole
victimizing
strong woman metaphor because, we are by nature strong. Hello, anybody who's birthed a child knows that physical strength, but also, we have huge mental and emotional strength. So we are strong and we are powerful and we are beautiful. And we just need to trust, we need to trust that. We need to trust the intuitive side of our natures. This group, I operate on what I call my core principles of collaboration, organic reach, resonance and equilibrium, because they're the things I think that women operate out of. You know, we not that we don't like structure and rules and boundaries and all of those things, but we do operate differently. And my goal, my aim is for women to know that how they operate is not just valid, it's amazingly powerful and wonderful. Trust it.
They are lovely, absolutely beautiful words to leave this conversation on, I have to say. But I do have to ask you another question, though. Is there an offer that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Certainly. I spoke about mentoring before, and I don't take on many mentees at a time. So I usually take on, open up 5 places. So I've opened up 5 new places for mentoring, and I always do it for a defined period of time. So for 3 months, and then we can assess after that. So it's not like people are signing up for a year's mentoring. We do it for 3 months. We do it twice a month, have a mentoring session twice a month. So that is for women only. So now, do you want to know investment or just what the offer is?
No, that's okay. We'll have all the details anyway in our summary.
Yeah, I think that's probably
for our listeners. So it's a lot easier with the details.
That's right. And and I'm open to having, and I love to have like an initial 15-minute chat. Yeah, just to see how we fit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really important.
Very important. Exactly.
And then we talk through the details.
Exactly. Well, you've been fabulous to chat to today with Bron, like absolutely amazing. It's been wonderful learning about your journey and just how you've been inspired to inspire others. And it's just lovely to see, hear about, the challenges that you went through, but flipping them over into something positive, which was absolutely great. Like we just said, the details of Bron's offer will be in our podcast summary below. Be sure to click on the link and don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much again, Bron, for your time today.
Oh, it's been lovely, Nikki. Thank you so much for your great questions.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to the Wise Dome podcast. If you enjoyed and have been inspired by this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, do subscribe and please share it with others. Post about us on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, Nikki Kelly, you can follow me on Instagram at Wise Dome Podcast, WISEDOME Podcast. I'm Nikki Kelly. Thanks again, and we'll catch up next time.